Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to call to order our Lucan Biddulph Special Council meeting for Thursday, March the 30th. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. I'd like to welcome all the members of the public that are here this evening. This is going to be a public meeting, and for those watching on YouTube, it is a full house, and it's been a long time since we've had this many bodies here. So it's great to see this sort of public engagement and participation. Just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. There is a attendance list that's going around, and we would ask that everybody that is here sign in. I believe it's name and address and a way to contact. Is that what's on that? Okay. And I do want to remind everybody that that any comments expressed and any written material presented will become a matter of public record for full disclosure. And if you have any questions after this meeting this evening, we ask that you direct those to Jeff Little, our Public Works Manager. And I believe you all have his contact information. If you don't, certainly at the end of the evening, we can provide that for you. I also want to let you know to those of you in the gallery, as well as those watching either live or back at their convenience, that we will be receiving written comments on tonight's meeting until May the 1st. And so that's a Monday. And so that's for about another month from now. So May the 1st will be the last day that we will be receiving written comments. Members of the public who have registered and requested to speak will be given a maximum of 10 minutes to address council and provide comments on the proposed bylaw that we're meeting for tonight. In keeping with our procedural bylaw and our zone policy, I would like to remind everyone and that includes council and our meeting participants, to use respectful language and decorum throughout the meeting. The order of proceedings for tonight's public meeting will be as follows. Our Public Works Manager, Jeff Little, will present a staff report and the brief purpose for tonight's meeting. Jeff Cade from the Assalbo Bayfield Conservation Authority and Karen Winfield, Jenna Allen, and Kara Ramsey, from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority will provide comments regarding the proposed site alteration bylaw. Chief Building Official Arnie Marsman will then provide input and comments. After Arnie's done, the floor will be open to the public for comments and questions. And I'm going to call on each participant that has registered. I've got a list of all the registered participants, and I'll just call you out. You may have something to say, you may not, but I will go through the list of registered participants. And of course, you will be given the opportunity to speak. I would ask you that when you do speak, if you could state your name and address so that those comments and your participation can be properly reflected in the minutes. I do ask that you listen carefully to the comments that will be presented from everybody here, and that not to go over and repeat the same comment over and over again. If you hear something from one of your neighbors that you're in agreement with, that's what you were going to say, please feel free to come up to the microphone and say, you know, I agree with what Huey Dietrich said, or something to that nature. And that will be reflected, and certainly council will certainly understand where you are where your support is. After I've gone through the list of registered participants, then the floor will be open to anybody who hasn't registered that would like to provide comment. And again, you'll be given a maximum of 10 minutes to speak. And then after the floor has been taken by members of the public, at that time, members of council will have the opportunity to provide comments or questions to staff and or the representatives from the CA. And I would ask that all comments and questions be directed through me, the chair. And with that, again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and participating. If you know me, you know that I am enthusiastic and a great proponent of the public process. So it is great to see everybody here tonight taking an interest in what we're going to be discussing. With that, I don't believe we need a motion to move into a public meeting. I will turn it over to Jeff Little, our Public Works Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just give a little brief background and a little bit of information on beginning this evening. There was a request put through council in 2022 to have staff prepare a report on a site alteration bylaw for council to consider. The report was presented on June 21st, 2022, and included a draft bylaw. Council directed staff to formalize the draft bylaw for council. After the June 21st meeting, a number of comments were received from the public. It was decided that a public meeting would be held to allow stakeholders and the public an opportunity to provide comments for council's consideration prior to finalizing any of the draft bylaw or the draft bylaw. The Upper Thames and the ABCA will be providing comment tonight, and their comments will be based on how a site alteration bylaw fits into their perspective as a conservation authority. The Chief Building Officer, Arnie Marsman, will be providing comments as well. Middlesex Center is currently looking at modifying their bylaw in the wake of Bill 23, which was passed by the provincial government. Their modifications to their existing site alteration bylaw will assist in dealing with small developments that now do not need site plan approval. And then at that point, the public will be able to provide comments for council's consideration. Before we move on to the next one, there's a couple of items I just would like to present before I'm done speaking, Madam Mayor. One is that I just like to say that the site bylaw that we have, or the process that we started in 2022, was not brought forward by any particular event in Lucan Biddulph or activity that was concerning. So I just wanted to make that statement prior to discussion. And as well, site alteration or a site alteration bylaw is not new. It has been around. There has been site alteration bylaws talked about for over 20 years. So other than that, that's about it for now, and I will turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for those comments, Jeff. At this time, I guess we'll go to, I don't know who wants to take it first, whether Upper Thames or ABCA. I'll go to Upper Thames first, and I would like to welcome Karen Winfield and Jenna Allen and Kara Ramsey. And I'll let Upper Thames, or now I'm thinking Jeff Cade's going to take it.
Yes, I actually won the coin toss, so I'm going to speak on behalf of both conservation authorities right at the moment, and certainly my contemporaries here, I'll provide some input as needed. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Correct. Yep.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome. Again, for those that don't know me or have met me before, my name is Jeff Cade. I'm the manager of water and planning at the AuSable Bayfield Conservation Authority. We have also staff from the Upper Thames that are here this evening, tonight, that were introduced earlier. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am here to provide input on behalf of the two CAs. I want to be fairly clear in that the AuSable Bayfield and the Upper Thames certainly support the municipality's review of a site alteration bylaw. We see it as fairly important. We don't see it as duplicating what we do. We see it as being complementary, and I'll explain that a little bit in a little bit. So as I think everyone knows here, the conservation authorities do fill a number of roles for municipalities. One of them is, and the primary one is a regulatory role where we regulate activities in those lands which are described as hazardous. Hazardous lands would be those which would be subject to flooding or soils instability. I don't specifically know about the land area in Upper Thames, but I can say in the AuSable Bayfield watershed, of the land area of Lucan Biddulph within our jurisdiction, we only regulate about 10% of that land area. So it's a small area. We don't regulate everywhere. And we are only regulating those activities which can either be impacted by the hazard or would create additional impacts to that hazard. So the obvious things would be building in a floodplain or putting fill in the floodplain, which would create an additional erosion hazard. So we are quite focused on the landscape where we're regulating. And we see a site alteration bylaw is going to be complementary to that. Further, I think everyone here is familiar that conservation authorities are going through some challenging times right at the moment. Our roles and responsibilities are changing quite a bit. Bill 23 was mentioned a few minutes ago. That is certainly changing what we do on behalf and for our municipalities. As you know, you're restricted from or by where you can get comments now on certainly Planning Act applications with certain components of that. We are also expecting changes to our regulatory role in the near future. We don't know what that is going to be, quite frankly, and what ramifications that's going to have in the long term. So we believe that a well thought out site alteration bylaw is going to help the municipality to pivot as we go through our changes and the municipality is required to change as a result. I'm going to just speak generally from a high level about the benefits that we see as a site alteration bylaw. We do see that they will mitigate negative impacts on or to adjacent properties, either by drainage or perhaps deleterious substances which have a tendency to migrate if they're not managed properly. We are concerned certainly with regards to the loss of natural features, be that woodlots or wetlands. We are concerned certainly about water courses and municipal drains. We see a site alteration bylaw is going to help to protect those features. And certainly water quality. And I think other jurisdictions find that site alteration bylaws also help to protect valuable farmland as that gets snapped up for the purposes of storing fill. We do see obviously a site alteration bylaw which addresses significant amounts of fill is going to help with local drainage matters. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at the very large drainage feature or the very large flood components. So the smaller drainage features are less of a concern under our regulations. We simply don't have the tools in the toolbox to deal with that. So we do see a site alteration bylaw as complementary to what we're doing in trying to address those drainage issues. We do see that we can address concerns with a site alteration bylaw through stipulating sediment and erosion control measures, which are fairly important as you're trying to protect water courses and drainage features and so forth. We also think that it would be appropriate to start considering timing of when specifically the movement of fill occurs. And certainly I'm sure I'm not speaking about roads or anything like that. I'm sure you're going to be concerned about impacts to your infrastructure. But I'm also would be concerned about fill being moved or areas being disturbed during some inopportune times. I think it would also be prudent to identify and understand the quality of fill that's being received at a site. And getting an understanding about the origins and quantity of fill that's being received on a specific property. Those are things that, again, that I'm speaking that it's beyond the purview of the CA if it's outside of the regulated area. Again, we do not see that a proposed bylaw would be a duplication of what we already do. We see it, and we certainly don't want that by any stretch of the imagination. We also don't think that many of the things that would be addressed in a site alteration bylaw would be of provincial interest either, whether it be through the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, or MNRF, and so forth. So it is something which will address local concerns, and I think that's fairly important. I did ask for a couple of examples from Upper Thames that they might be able to provide us that I could relate to you. And where either a site alteration bylaw could have helped or did help. I know certainly from my perspective, we are seeing increasing concerns from residents that are phoning us, specifically about movement of significant quantities of fill within our jurisdiction. Some of these things we can deal with, but some of them we can't. And it's certainly, I think, the residents of our area are starting to recognize some concerns that way. They're certainly calling our office. Upper Thames provided me a couple of examples. So they outline that placement of fill in a large unregulated area, specifically a pond, it interrupted groundwater flow, and it ended up causing a negative impact or causing an adjacent commercial area septic system to fail. So these are situations where, again, the CAs aren't involved just because of the regulated area. They did outline an instance in another municipality which did have a site alteration bylaw, where the municipality was able to restrict a landowner, a developer who did not have Planning Act approval yet. They had already started site changes, site alterations, and it was starting to cause negative impacts through soils movement and loss of soil to adjacent properties. So the municipality was able to get a handle on that and help to protect the residents of the area. In closing, we are absolutely committed to helping you address any concerns about duplication. We are as equally concerned that way. We want to ensure that what, if anything, does get approved is complementary to what we're doing, certainly. And we think that there are a number of opportunities to do that. I speak not only for myself, but I think for Upper Thames, we are absolutely motivated to help you and will provide any input in a bylaw as you see fit. And that, unless my friends have something else to say, that's all that I had prepared. I was keeping it fairly high level. We certainly have reviewed the draft bylaw that we've received, and we can provide some written comments on that. I know I saw a couple of things I would like to be addressed. They're fairly minor, frankly, but I didn't want to get into that tonight. I just wanted to give a very high level from the perspective of the authority, and I think to provide input or an idea to all the people in the audience today that we do not see this as duplication. We do see it as complementary to what we're doing. So with that, unless someone else wants to say anything, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And I'm taking it that Upper Thames is happy with the comments that Jeff has made. And obviously feel free to pipe in when you see fit, okay? Okay, Arnie, I will hand it over to you for your background and comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to Council, as you may recall, I think it was back in January, I brought a year-end building report to Council with some plans for what we'd like to do in 2023. And one of those would be to bring a new building bylaw to Council. And as referred to already, the Bill 23 passed last year, the More Homes Built Faster Act. We really do support more homes faster, but there's some concerns across the province that some of the implications of this act specifically with regards to small residential developments. Developments with between 3 and 10 new residential units would be exempt from plans of subdivision and exempt from site plan control. They would just be fast tracked straight to building permit. And our concern, and the concern of many others, is that this fast track to building permit doesn't give the municipality or the site a good evaluation of a number of things such as stormwater management, site servicing, site grading, the municipal infrastructure that's going to be receiving stormwater from that site, and the sanitary and the water supply to that property. It's very extensive evaluation that is done by municipal staff when a plan of subdivision is proposed. And the concern across the county, at least I can speak for, is that fast tracking residential developments of 3 to 10 units without that larger view would be wrong. So and as council knows, we do building inspection for 5 municipalities in the county. And so with our building bylaw that I'd like to take to these 5 councils, I'd like to include an amendment that requires a site alteration permit for residential developments between 3 and 10 units. So the requirement for a site alteration permit before you apply for your building permit gives us certainty that site servicing, site drainage, and a number of things, site grading, stormwater management, they're looked at the time before building permits are issued. So we've spoken with Strathroy Caradoc. Both Strathroy Caradoc and Middlesex Center have site alteration bylaws. Neither of us have this in our bylaws yet, so we're amending those bylaws. We're working with the county solicitor to get the right wording. And the other 4 municipalities that we do inspections for do not have site alteration bylaws. So in bringing my new building bylaw to those municipalities requesting a site alteration permit, we really would need a site alteration bylaw to be brought to the same council meeting so that they can work together. So that's my ask. And I can provide comments to the clerk's department of something we could add to the proposed bylaw today that looks at small residential developments between 3 and 10 units. I'm happy to provide that to the clerk's department before May 1st, absolutely. And hopefully shortly thereafter, once council approves some form of a bylaw, we can bring a building bylaw as well to council. That's my information for today.
So your timeline with the other 4 municipalities that you provide building services to would fall. I mean, obviously you want to, as you say, just bring one bylaw to all municipalities at the same time. So that falls within this this timeline of.
Yeah, certainly through the mayor.
Yeah.
Certainly May 1st is ambitious for me to meet that in our other municipalities. I need to present this to other councils yet as well and to ours, and we're still finalizing some wording. So even the first half, I think we'd be very satisfied if we can take something to these councils in the first half of this year.
And then I just want to go back to Upper Thames. Jeff said he's going to provide written comment. Will Upper Thames be doing the same thing?
Yes, we intend to. And just I don't want to overstretch on Jeff's comments. I just want to say we're probably the reason that everyone's here tonight. We've got 14 plus municipalities in our watershed, and we've seen the benefits of site alteration bylaws. For the ones that do, I can show you, I could give you all sorts of case studies, but we're the ones that are actively encouraging our municipalities that don't have a site alteration bylaw to adopt one.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Okay, on to our oral submissions from the public. So at this time, now's the time that we're going to hear from everybody that's here tonight. So as I say, I'm going to go through the list of registered participants, and then I will open it up to anybody that hasn't registered. So first up is Cameron Knipp.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My name is Cam Knipp and my address is 35521 Richmond Street, and I farm in the township of Lucan Biddulph. And I hereby move for the Lucan Biddulph Council to withdraw the proposed bylaw number 38-2022, the proposed site alteration bylaw, on the following grounds. The existing laws and regulations are already sufficient to cover the stated prohibitions and regulations in the proposed site alteration bylaw. These regulations include, but are not limited to, the Municipal Drainage Act, the Highway Traffic Act, the Nutrient Management Act, and the Planning Act. Additional bureaucracy, as well as increased administration and application fees, are a growing burden for all stakeholders in the township of Lucan and Biddulph. Routine agricultural practices, such as installing tile drainage, preventing erosion through the use of berms, and various other land improvements, will fall victim to this proposed bylaw. The Normal Farming Practices Act of 1998 protects a farmer's right to engage in these routine agricultural practices without obtaining permits. Further stated, agriculture relies heavily on the weather, and timing is essential for seasonal operations. Land improvement projects weighed down by the proposed site alteration bylaw will affect the agricultural sector's ability to perform efficiently. It will adversely impact a landowner's capacity to act as a good steward of the land. The proposed site alteration bylaw does not serve stakeholders. There should be concern that it may leave the township vulnerable to litigation in a court of competent jurisdiction. Thank you all very much for your time and consideration. Your help in maintaining an efficient, healthy, and vibrant municipality is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Cam. Cliff, did you have some comments you wanted to make as well?
My name's Clifford Knipp, and I live in Lucan and Biddulph at 5637 Adair Drive. The sentiments that I would like to express were already very well expressed by this fine gentleman behind me. So I will just leave it at that. And I would at least like to see agricultural exempt from any proposed bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, then I've got Calvin Knipp.
Good evening. My name's Calvin Knipp. I live in Lucan and Biddulph at 6615 Whalen Line, and also farm in Lucan and Biddulph. My sentiments have already been expressed by the previous two gentlemen. I wouldn't talk about their fineness, but I believe that farming practices and agriculture should be exempt from this bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Hugh Dietrich.
My name's Hugh Dietrich. I live on 33973 Roman Line. I'm a farmer in Lucan and Biddulph and farm also in some other townships. I'd like thank you, Madam Mayor, for actually having a public meeting about this. I do farm in other townships as well. And some of those townships, we did not get the privilege to a hearing like this. And I don't think the bylaw would probably go quite as well in those other townships if all the farmers actually knew what was going on there. So I am strongly opposed to this bylaw. I'm going to give a farmer's perspective to this a little bit. I just kind of looked at the background too when this was started out. And I think there's a lot of rules that are duplicated. I disagree with some of the previous speakers. I think there's a lot of rules that are already in place to take care of this. And I think it's going to be a big bureaucracy. One thing in the background stated from Jeff's in the first page, it says litigation or threat of litigation is the only legal option available for property owners, including the township, and negatively affected by site alteration. Well, I think that's actually further from the truth. Like if it's a municipal drain or whatever, every landowner in the township or every landowner in the province of Ontario has the right to petition. And the right to petition is far from litigation. Contrary, if this bylaw goes through, the only recourse is litigation. There's no appeal process. There's nothing lined out in this. So it actually is totally opposite of what the statement is. It'll force the township and stakeholders in the township to litigation if there is a problem. I like to, when I'm trying to see the other side and what the benefits would be with a proposed bylaw like this. I did reach out to other stakeholders in the township or work in the township other than farmers. So they actually sent letters into the township. One being Carl Robinson, who is a municipal drain contractor. And I just like to read some of his things that he outlined. Routine agricultural practices such as installing tile drainage, preventing erosion through the use of berms and various other land improvements will fall victim to the proposed bylaw. The Normal Farming Practice Act of 1998 protects the farmer's right to engage in these routine agricultural practices without obtaining permits. And I know in the bylaw, there's some provision in there if it's a farming practice, but it leaves a gray area if it is or is not a normal farming practice. And that could be left up to the interpretation to the bylaw officer. And I don't think, and once that process is started, if that bylaw officer wants to enforce something, that could create litigation. One more part of his statement that he sent to township. The fact the township is exempt from this bylaw should be a grave concern to the residents of the township. How can you implement a bylaw that your township is not obligated to adhere to? Well, to me, that makes no sense. Of course, like, I hope you're exempt, because as a taxpayer, I don't want to encourage costs for you guys to go all through that as well. Like, how would you run your township every time you wanted to fill a ditch or do alterations that you had to get another jurisdiction or approval and pay for that? Like, it'd be really hard to function. So I don't think that makes any sense. Another person I reached out to was Robert Robinson that installs installs farm tile. And it's going to read, he sent a letter to the township as well. And it's going to read a couple of his statements. In order to tell someone they have altered the property elevation, and you have to know what the elevation is now. How much would it cost to map the municipality for elevations? So if I come in to get a permit, and it's not going to just be a paper exchange, you're going to have to say, well, what are you doing? I'm going to put 100 loads of dirt in. I'm going to put a broad-based berm in. Well, what is the elevation now? So someone on staff, you have to have someone qualified to do that. If the township in Lucan Biddulph is going to have that, are you going to sub that out to a drainage engineer or whoever? That's going to create a lot of costs. Or to map the whole township to know what the elevations are would be quite expensive. Another comment he has, erosion over the years has created small gullies. With this bylaw, a farmer cannot repair this without a permit, which makes no sense to me. And you could be in the fine line too. You're going to put 3 loads of dirt in. You might not think you need a permit. You go to do this, and all of a sudden it takes 8 loads, 10 loads. Like, are you going to go, oh my God, I'm breaking the law here. I got to go get a permit, or what's going on? So for those reasons there, excuse me. Also, I reached out to Mike DeVos, which is your drainage superintendent works for Spreets and Associates. I asked what he thought of the bylaw, and the time when this bylaw was written and submitted to council, he was not aware of the proposed bylaw. And to me, that as council or Lucan Biddulph, they're probably going to be reaching out to an engineer at some point to enforce this bylaw. And he was not consulted. This is my take on it. This is not Mike's words. I want to say I'm not quoting something here, but you never consulted an engineer on how farmers could react or if farmers should be included in this bylaw. I have worked with Brad Glassman on a lot of berms, and we had that on a council meeting, I think a year ago. I disagree with Jeff on his statements there. I've done several berms with Brad, and I don't see, my feeling from Brad is I don't see how a bylaw would would benefit the township on an agricultural perspective. Because the timeliness of that, if you wanted to do berms, let's say in August, you might have to take fill like a year ahead, because if we can get fill from a certain time, and those designs might require fill or may not require fill, just the timeliness of that is really pertinent. And I disagree, Jeff. You said the one fill like with affected a pond. Well, if the septic must be too close to the pond, if the septic's right beside the pond, that doesn't make any sense to me. And and I don't think you're gonna have enough staff to monitor all this. I just want to conclude, and then in the bylaw at the back, then the enforcement of the bylaw, it gives the bylaw officer the right to come onto your land, and once he lays a charge, there is no appeal process. A municipal drain, there's appeal process. And he has the right to go on all 44,000 acres in Biddulph without notice. And I think that's an overreach of a landowner. Like the landowner should have its rights. I also think it's going to just create a lot of bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is created to sustain itself. It's just going to make another whole mess of red tape. And for those reasons, I'm totally opposed to the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Hugh. Paul Dietrich.
Sorry.
Oh. You're just getting a little anxious, Jake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paul Dietrich, 35402 St. Spray Line, Lucan. I would like to speak against a proposed site alteration bylaw as well. I agree with all the previous statements and the previous speakers. As a farmer, I know that timing is of the essence, and the proposed site alteration bylaw would make an already hard job even harder during seasons of unpredictable weather. This bylaw could prevent developers and farmers alike to haul fill at unfavorable times of the year. To me, it is clear that agriculture should be exempt from this bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And now Jake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak. My name is Jake Dietrich. I live on the Roman line, and as a ratepayer, landowner, resident, and farmer in the township of Lucan-Biddulph, I am opposed to this bylaw. I disagree with the nature of the bylaw, as it's being put into place to solve problems that do not exist in areas that are covered by other jurisdictions and laws, as mentioned by Jeff. The township and the enforcement protocols / agents are unqualified in the areas that the bylaw will oversee. A bylaw officer will know very little about farm drainage or drainage in any area. The bylaw has associated costs that will create a deadweight loss on project completion with little benefit and public good. How many times a year does the bylaw engage in work that would require permits if they were not exempt? I also would like to be exempt from this bylaw, clearly. Just because an issue can be solved with this bylaw doesn't mean that it's the best course of action as a solution, as it has fines without appeal. Whereas if I ran into a situation where a municipal drainage act would come into place, I think that it's more fine tooth comb to deal with that issue. Other than that, that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Jake. Okay, the next one on my list is Tony Vanderhook.
Thank you, Council, Madam Speaker. I'm in agreements with all the previous speakers as well. And I oppose this proposed bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that. Dale Cook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My name is Dale Cook and I farm at 15687 16 Mile Road in Farmer, London Township. I agree with Huey and the Knipp family. I'm not very good at media speak and smoothing fecal matter over. It's I've seen a lot of the work that some of the farmers have done here in this township, and you should be very, very proud of what they've done with moving some stuff. And to exempt yourself and not someone else is not a good decision. As Huey had mentioned earlier, there's already acts in place, the Drainage Act, Highway Traffic Act. And there's, if you have a problem, there's already a tribunals in that you can, what's the word I'm looking for? To address any problems. Litigation is not a way to go. That just creates hard feelings. I'll leave it at that. There's the gentleman here had a lot that I disagree with. I won't get into that. But I've seen a lot of work that's, like I say, there's dirt that gets moved out of these subdivisions that gets piled up. Well, where is it going to go? And you have the right to let it move around and enhance the value and the aesthetics of your township, which you should be darn proud of because it looks good. I live in the township, it's the other side of the highway and it's terrible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for that, Dale. Okay, Lee McGuire.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm Leah McGuire and I'm speaking on behalf of Grace Farms. Our home farm is 34831 Mitchell Line. We too oppose this bylaw and think that agriculture should be exempt. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Leah. Okay, that is all I have for my registered participants. So at this time, I will open it up to anybody else that's here this evening that would like to speak. And I would invite you up to the podium. Same rules apply. If you can provide your name and your address for the record, and you're invited to speak. You'll have 10 minutes. I know what I did not mention was that as has been mentioned, we've received a number of written comments over the course of when it was first brought up for discussion back in 2022. And when the bylaw and staff report come to council for a discussion and a decision, all of those written comments will be included in that whole presentation. But I can assure you here, and I can assure people, I can ensure the people that are watching that council has seen all of the written comments. So we're well aware, and it will be part of the staff report that eventually comes to council. So if anybody else would like to speak, you are welcome to come up to the podium, name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Council. My name is Eric Dietrich. I reside at 7926 Fallon Drive on the edge of Granton. As a farmer and landowner in the township, I just want to echo the reason there is dirt movement is to protect the environment and to protect erosion and soils and farmland. We are not simply moving dirt just for the sake of moving dirt. We are doing that to benefit the environment. I am strongly opposed to this bylaw, and I want to thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Alan Cunningham, 35317 Corsi Line. I agree with the rest of my fellow farmers here and but not like this bylaw as proposed. Simple. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Anyone else?
I might as well speak.
Oh.
I moved dirt for, I guess you might say, a
Just
living.
Name and address.
My name's Stephen Carter, 34998 Lucan Biddulph. I come here tonight to see what actually is going on, and we've moved a lot of dirt in this town. I think there was a mountain of dirt over at that school, and we moved a lot of it, and it went a lot of places. What's going to happen now? Does that dirt just pile up? Like, there's repercussions to all this. I think if the farmers take it and use it most of them will all use it in the proper course. And I think you've got to consider what's going to happen if we can only move 10 loads. I move 10 loads every year on a washout in my farm. I mean, it's part of what has to be done. I think that's the only thing I can see is there was dirt moving over here by the new development. There seems to be always dirt moving. I think when you go beyond this, if you create this bylaw, where's it going to go? If it can't go to a farm, yes, they can get a permit, but maybe at that course of time, just like I think one of the gentlemen said, sometimes timing is not. So they have to pile it up, and that's the extra cost. If that's what they agree on, I guess that's fine. But I think you got to think beyond this and know that if you regulate where the dirt can go or not, I think you got to think about the other side of it. If you can't move the dirt, where's it going to go? And I strongly think that we've got along for 150 years moving dirt around, and I think everybody does it in a pretty good manner. I think we don't need a litigation bylaw and what have you to regulate all that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
My name is Henk Vandenburg, 34052 Mitchell Line. My concern is if you need a permit, it's going to delay it forever. Last year I had to have twice a permit from the Upper Thames. We came here and they opposed it the last couple minutes before the meeting. And then we waited another 2 months. And on the end, they didn't even have a right to say anything. Dus that's a concern for me. If you need a permit, you can have it laying there for years and nothing happens to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Anyone else? Okay, so I'll ask again if anyone else wants to make a public verbal comment. Oh,
Alan Cunningham, do I go through that same thing again?
no, it's fine.
All right. So I'm just curious. If I need dirt on my property, does Steve Carter need a permit to haul it? Steve Carter need a permit to doze it? Alan Cunningham needs a permit to supervise, and Cunningham Farms Inc. needs a permit to accept it. Is that correct?
I don't know how we want to handle this because it's just really for public comment on what's in front of you, but
I thought I could ask a question.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Mayor. So you're asking how many permits are
Yeah,
needed?
who
like-
all needs a permit? Do I need a permit to give it away? Do I need a permit to accept it? Do I need a permit to truck it? Do I need a permit to push it?
Currently, there's no permits.
No, in the proposed bylaw.
In the proposed bylaw,
Please keep up.
there is a permit out there for any sort of alterations to your property. That's what we're discussing.
Okay, so I don't need someone to have a permit to truck it. I just need someone to permit to accept the dirt. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I believe. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
okay. Okay, Huey?
Yeah, just for clarification, Jeff, but wouldn't there be two permits with that? Because a permit where you're altering where you're taking the dirt from and then where the site is going, there could involve two permits with that, would it not be?
No, the township right now doesn't issue any permits from where you're taking
No, I
it.
know on the proposed bylaw. Like if I was taking dirt from one farm to the next farm, so I'm altering the one farm and I'm taking it to the next farm. So that, would that require two permits? I think that's what Alan's getting at.
Yeah, no, I would see that as one project.
Okay. That's good. And I guess one last comment. I think I see this very restrictive, but one thing that we should be looking for, and we've worked on a lot of municipal drains, is there's a lot of municipal drains in this township. I got to argue maybe 70% that probably are not up to standard. Like we're working on that one right now is 1958. There's a lot of stuff that maintenance on drains, we should be directing our energy to make everything better instead of being more restrictive. Because it doesn't matter how good it is now, it can always be better. And that's my last comment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Any more comments from the floor? And this will be the last time that I ask for any more comments from the floor. Okay, just a reminder that you are able to provide written comments and will be accepting them, until May the 1st. At this time, I would turn to council for any clarifications or questions that you might have. Councillor Westman.
Yeah, so actually, here we brought up a good question. I'm still fairly new to the knowledge of this thing, so I'm working through it, but so when a subdivision clears a lot of dirt and makes a big pile, I was under the impression that they would have to have some form of permitting to actually get rid of it. Is that not the case? Because it's my understanding during the initial stages when the concept was brought to me for to bring to council, that the providers of the fill had to have some form of tracking or regulation on where the dirt was going. So they didn't just give it away to anything, that there was, quality of the fill, that kind of stuff all had to be kind of read. Like, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, through the mayor. So there is the Ministry of Environment has, through the Environmental Protection Act and the excessive soils movement regulations. Finally, in 2023, we've gotten clarification on some of the stuff. We're still trying to work everything out. But if you take dirt out of the ground now, you should be having a plan in place where you're taking it. So it's going to become the Ministry of Environment is looking at the people that dig it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to come up with a plan at where they're going. But that's not necessarily a permit in place. They just have to put a plan in place.
Councillor Regan, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So, and don't know if I require an answer right away, but Mr. Hugh Dietrich brought up a point about how do we tell the difference between a violation of the site alteration and normal farming practices? And that just struck me as a concern. I know that what we have is a proposed site alteration bylaw. It's in rough form, it's a draft. That was just a concern. So I'm not really asking for any answer right now, Jeff, or anything. It was just a concern that brought up that I didn't want to get lost, because that's something that was concerned. And the other point, if I may, Your Worship, Mr. J. Dietrich brought up a point suggesting that, and if I don't want to misquote you, sorry, sir, this bylaw is for problems that do not exist. So I'm not sure I understand that. So I may ask for clarification when this is brought forward again about that, perhaps just to give staff a heads up, because I'm just concerned if this is for things that it's not a problem, why do we have it now? Why are we talking about it? Why are 4 of the municipalities thinking about putting this in place? So again, as somebody who's not in farming, I need to know that. So thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just a bit further to Councillor Regan's point, that was kind of the main question I was going to ask, and whether this is the appropriate venue or if we discuss that at the later meeting. But I think Jeff did address it in his introduction, that this was brought about not for any particular event that happened. There wasn't really a trigger. It's more of just, we were looking at adding this tool. So I wanted to ask that, I guess, like to staff, like historically, do we have a problem? Have we had a problem with this? Have there been any incidences in the past that where there's been a negative impact either to the environment or otherwise? Can we discuss that now, whether that's there has been that, or do we save that for the future meeting?
No, I think you can ask that now. And I do think then I would also like even in keeping with getting the answer tonight, when council goes to debate it, I also think that that's a good discussion point to bring up at that time as well.
Yeah, and through the mayor to Councillor Hodgins, just to kind of elaborate what I said, that I'm unaware of any large site alteration that has taken place in Lucan Biddulph that has, this would bylaw would have saved us from. So no, I'm not I've only been here for a few years, so I don't have a lot of history, but I don't see this as a past activity driven bylaw. I think it's more about it's more about a bylaw that's looking towards the future rather than the past. So I would say no, I don't have any particular activity that's taken place.
Jeff, follow up?
Yes, please. And through you, Madam Mayor, maybe if I could just ask the same question to the conservation authorities, maybe, I know Jeff, you've been around for longer, just the same question, I guess, like historically, have there been issues in Lucan Biddulph with
I'll perhaps comment on behalf of the ABCA and let Upper Thames. I would agree with Mr. Little through you, Your Worship, that this may be less of a concern right now in terms of addressing something that has occurred in the past, and more something that's being proactive. As I opined, we are seeing changes to the Conservation Authorities Act, which you well know are going to change how you do business. And I think this is an important component of that. We are seeing, and you know as well as anyone, that your municipality is developing quite a bit. And we heard even through the audience today about the huge piles of soil that are being generated through this. So I think this is a means by which it helps you to manage that before it does get out of hand. So I'll perhaps, I think it's a proactive measure from my perspective. I'll defer to Upper Thames if they have any comments.
Anything else? Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you. And through you. So it sounds like there hasn't really been a historic issue. So in some of our neighboring municipalities, it sounds like Middlesex Center and Strathroy do have a site alteration bylaw that has been in place for a while. Do we have any knowledge of, since those have been rolled out, how that's gone? Whether like what the activity is with that bylaw, or if we don't have that information available now, is that something that we could have available for the next meeting?
I think that that would be good information to bring back when we actually have that discussion. Okay. Any other comments from council at this time? Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
Yeah, just, I think going back, the original report in June 2021, it had the fees identified. Where there was no fee up to 50 cubic meters. And then fees for the other amounts. Are those still the fees that are being proposed currently with this current bylaw?
Through the mayor. So I'd like to just kind of we're going back. When we brought forward that draft bylaw, it was purely as an example of a bylaw. In the discussions that followed, in when we were going back through that meeting, we talked about, we didn't want, we don't want to hamper, small operations. We don't want to hamper agricultural activities. That wasn't the goal of the site alteration bylaw. And at the time, the fees and the amounts of dirt to be moved were open for review or input, as we're doing right now. So I would say the fees and the amounts that we talk about moving around are not set whatsoever, that they were just used as a kind of a placeholder or an example in the bylaw itself. So and again, I'm don't repeat that draft bylaw that's been distributed was an example of a bylaw that could be implemented. And at that time in council, the recommendation was to come back with a draft bylaw, that we knew that wasn't actually the final, sort of the final kick at the can. And one of the things that we have noticed is, and we've heard it here tonight, is the municipal drain material. Obviously, a municipal drain has to have an engineering report tied to it. So it really is almost, I don't want to say it's a duplication, but it doesn't need a permit because it's following the same rules as what a permit would look at. So so when we talk about that draft bylaw, that was purely an example of something that's could be put in place. So
My last item through you, Madam Mayor. Quite a few people brought up, or they had the point that agriculture should be exempt. And so part 7 of the bylaw does talk through the exemptions. And one of those is normal farm practices as defined in the Farming and Food Production and Protection Act. So my question is agricultural generally exempt, or what does that include and what does that not include? Because are most people's concerns, or a lot of these concerns that were presented about agricultural practices, are they already exempt from this bylaw through that provision?
I think if I can jump in, since Jeff said that this is a draft one, I think what will come back after taking in the public comment, after working with Arnie, I think those will be, I think that all of that will be addressed. And unless you want to, I think maybe that question is probably more appropriate when the actual bylaw is presented. But if you wanted, maybe, did you want an understanding or clarification of when it says in the draft, in this draft, normal farming practices, what would that be? Is that what you're looking for, or?
Yeah, and I think, well, it's referring to another act, so I guess there already is a definition. I think it just says, anything that's considered standard practice on farms or new technology that's used. But like, does that include berming and other things?
Yeah, and through the mayor, I think, and I'll say, and I'll answer the question and then I'll follow it up with a little bit of information. So, drainage, normal drainage on a farm is exempt. So if they're doing it now, and I'll be honest, I've seen what the Dietrichs have done with their berms in the grass waterways and that sort of thing. It's excellent work. And to me, that's being a steward of the land. And that's becoming a standard, and that's what we want to see in farming. So to me, when you're doing berming, and you're doing some of these grass waterways and tiling, that's normal farmer practices. Having said that, Madam Mayor, I have talked to a number of people in this room, and the concern is the definition of farming practices. It's one thing for me to say grass waterways are fine, but I know the concern in this room is what happens if someone else has a different definition of normal farming practices, and I've heard that as one of the concerns that's coming through. So to go back to Councillor Hodgins's question, that's a difficult one because normal farming practices are not exactly listed in point form. But what I would suggest is what's not farm, what would be not farm practices, right? Like for instance, taking off the topsoil and adding 3 feet of fill across the entire farm, that would be deemed non-farming practices. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked a little bit, but that would be the concern that I'm hearing in this room is the definition of farming practices.
Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, so I guess the next steps is that we are still going to be receiving public comment. And to again repeat myself, we'll receive those comments until May 1st. And staff will continue to take these comments. Staff report will come. Everybody will be working together. We do not have a date yet as to when it will come back to council, but I'm gathering from Arnie's comments that it would probably be well into 2023. So like mid-year. So probably the beginning of the summer, maybe. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So I want to again thank everybody for participating this evening. I think we've all taken notes, and of course, the beauty of Zoom is that now we can watch this back, and if we missed anything, we can certainly listen to the comments again. And again, anybody that didn't participate verbally, we're happy to receive your comments. And as I say, I really do appreciate the participation in tonight's meeting and you taking the time to deliver your concerns as to what we're discussing tonight. So I do appreciate that. With that, we do have one bylaw in front of us this evening, and it's bylaw 17-2023. And it is to confirm and adopt all the actions and proceedings of our council meeting this evening. And I would like a mover and a seconder so that if no one cares to speak to this bylaw on its first, second, and third reading, that it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. And then a motion to adjourn at 9 minutes after 7. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan, all in favor. And that's carried.